CBS News has learned President Biden is considering a series of sweeping changes to the Supreme Court if he's reelected. The proposals, first reported by the Washington Post, include term limits for all 9 justices, an enforceable ethics code, and a potentially new constitutional amendment that would eliminate broader immunity for presidents and other constitutional office holders. The last proposal follows the High Court's conservative majority 6-3 ruling that said former President Donald Trump has immunity from prosecution for official acts taken in office. These changes would mark a major shift for President Biden, who once served as the Senate Judiciary Committee chairman and has indicated in the past he wouldn't make changes to the court. To help us sort through all of this, let's bring in CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson. She's also a professor at Loyola Law School in Los Angeles. Jessica, first, how is the president going to do this? Can he make these changes to the Supreme Court? What's his route?
Well, he has 2 potential routes here, depending on what the change is. So if we take term limits, for instance, his commission that he put together to look at Supreme Court reforms was actually divided on the question as to whether or not Congress could impose term limits or if you need a constitutional amendment to do that, in part because that's the Constitution itself. Article 3 says that federal judges can keep their jobs during times of good behavior. And we have understood that to mean lifetime appointments. Now, there are some more kind of creative things that you could do through a congressional route. You could say something like you have active duty as a Supreme Court justice for 18 years, and then you have something like senior status. So you essentially force people to cycle off or only to hear limited types of cases. Now, the cleanest route, legally speaking, is through a constitutional amendment, but that's even harder than getting something passed through Congress, which, as you and I know, is very difficult in and of itself. And then there are other reforms we can talk about, like the ethics package or the constitutional amendment regarding immunity. The ethics package, I also think, has legal and practical issues.
It does seem like this is a grab bag but before we grab the other items in the bag, let me ask you about, so justices, as you mentioned, have lifetime appointments. What was the thinking behind that originally? And what's the new rationale for trying to give them an 18-year limit or whatever the limit happens to be?
I'll take the last part first. I think, honestly, the new rationale is we don't like, or people who support the reforms for the Supreme Court don't like a lot of their decisions. We tend to be really comfortable with lifetime appointments if we support the decisions that those judges and justices are making. And then, frankly, all of a sudden, we tend not to like lifetime appointments all that much when we disagree with their decisions. So you see a push from liberals and progressives for term limits after decisions like the Dobbs decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, the decision to strike down affirmative action, decisions to significantly weaken the administrative state. Now, with respect to why do we give this group lifetime appointments, in part because what we want them to do is judge, not judge the political wins, but judge any particular case. Just look at the facts, just look at the law, and don't think about what's popular or how is something going to play in the next election. We know that a lot of state court judges do face elections, and the statistics indicate they sometimes do make different decisions right before an election.
And Jessica, we're running out of time because of this COVID diagnosis of the president, but the ethics code, the Supreme Court adopted its own ethics code in November. So what's the difference between what Biden is proposing?
So super briefly, the Supreme Court ethics code doesn't have any teeth to it. There's no enforcement mechanism. Biden is saying we have an enforcement mechanism. I'm telling you, as somebody who teaches constitutional law, and we have a separation of powers concern if you want to try and mandate something on the Supreme Court through Congress.
Excellent. Jessica Levinson, thank you so much, as always, for your expertise.